Hey folks, back again. You're watching the MPL Weekly, and I'm here with Paul and Maria. My name's Becca, and we are watching some games that we're recapping, our favorite games that the Magic Pro League players have played this week. We're catching you up on the standings of our Spark Split, which of course, at the end of which, one player from each of 4 divisions is going to get a bye straight to the top 16 of our next Arena Mythic Championship, which is number 3. Oh, I paused on championship because I'm so tempted to say invitational because that was my first coverage,
right, yeah.
which was such a fun event. But no, this one's going to be at the end of June. And yeah, exciting qualifications for that are also this weekend, which we'll tell you guys about in a minute. But right now we're gearing up. We're going to watch another Mono-Red deck with Paulo, Vitor, Damo, Rosa. The mouthful again.
Yes.
PVDDR.
PVDDR.
Yeah. Or just
Paulo.
PV, or Paulo Doritos, you know, whatever you want.
Pablo Doritos.
I like the PVDDR because DDR was such a fun game back in the day, you know, at the arcade. And then Mike Sigrist, of course, known as Siggy. So these players have been playing for a while. PVDDR in 96, Sigrist in 95. And for this specific split, PVDDR is at 2-0. Obviously, these two players have not played as many matches as some we've seen earlier today. Sigrist with the 1-1 record. And wow, so many top finishes for PVDDR. We'll go with PV.
Top 8's like it's, you know, getting up in the morning.
Yeah, I
totally.
say he averages a Mythic Championship top 8 once a year.
Yeah, something like that.
It is ridiculous, and he's one of the players who just had continued success over the last 15 years. It's been an incredible run, and you know, just often considered one of the best players of all time.
And it seems that the best players keep sticking with Mono-Red. Let's see what Paulo brought today.
Taking a look at Paulo's specific version of Mono-Red here, one card not here, Chandra.
Yeah, I think maybe he missed the memo on Chandra. No, but we've actually just seen the power of Frenzy, and I think just in general, Experimental Frenzy is a more powerful card.
Yeah.
Oftentimes we've seen players have the option of choosing between casting Frenzy or Chandra, and almost every time they went with the Frenzy instead. And the only reason to not play Frenzy is if you think we're in an environment where people play more enchantment removal than Planeswalker removal.
Right.
But that's not what we see anymore because of the emergence of all the Planeswalker decks.
And Chandra being one of the few War of the Spark cards that's making it into, oh, there she is.
We'll
on
tuck
the
her in the sideboard.
Yeah.
Well, you can't play 6 Experimental Frenzies. That is against
I
the
don't know.
rules.
I don't know. We've seen people play 6 and 5, and I
Yeah,
mean,
right.
with a combination of Chandra and Experimental.
So Chandra just kind of acting as kind of the Experimental Frenzy number 5 and 6 here. When the matchups slow down a little bit, it gets a little grindier, you can bring in Chandra here. But, of course, mostly the same cards that we've seen from the other 2 Mono-Red lists. Tybalt, you know, potentially going to do a lot of work if he expects a lot of life gain.
And Mike Sigrist has the Esper control, which was way more popular in the metagame a couple months ago, but I wonder if you could tell me why fewer people are bringing it now.
Well, there's a couple of factors in play here. Number 1, Teferi Time Raveler is a card that a lot of people are playing. And Little T makes it so that you know, counter magic is just not very good anymore. So cards like Absorb have gotten a lot worse because if a Teferi Time Raveler is on the other side of the board, you can't use your counter magic. On top of that, players are playing with a lot more Planeswalkers, and traditionally, control decks have a really difficult time dealing with just a bunch of Planeswalkers on the battlefield. So players have instead opted to go for more proactive strategies and chosen to attack the metagame that way, because for a control deck to deal with the Resolve Vivian or Teferi, it's really hard. I mean, here, there is the 3 copies of Vraska's Contempt and the 4 copies of Teferi, but that's it.
And on the sideboard, what's interesting over here?
Well, Elder Spell. You just see Elder Spell everywhere.
You've got to do it.
People do not want to lose to all the Planeswalkers in both the Jeskai Planeswalkers deck, along with the various Dread Horde, 4-color Dread Horde decks that we've seen as well. So Elder Spell, key card here. It's, you know, the type of card that we made. It was the, well, okay, we're making a set with over 30 Planeswalkers.
What do we do about that?
What happens if that kind of gets out of hand? What do we need? And that's part of the reason why Elder Spell was created. It's like, okay, well, now we have this answer that people can go to if, you know, Planeswalkers do end up kind of dominating the format.
And then I saw Eldest Reborn also in the sideboard, which is more expensive, but is Planeswalker removal?
Yes, it also acts as a removal effect for Planeswalkers. You know, you have those decks that have all Planeswalkers and no creatures, and in those matchups, you can play it, they sacrifice a Planeswalker, and then it just gives you lots of value over time. It gives you 3 cards worth of value, right? It gets a Planeswalker, they discard a card, and then guess what? At the end, you can steal their Planeswalker off Chapter 3. So, you know, very, very powerful effect. And also, we saw kind of the Japanese players bring Carnage Tyrant, and it's a very, very clean answer to big hexproof creatures like that.
Very, very interesting. Let's see what happens in this Mono-Red versus Esper Control matchup.
All right, so we've got stuff like Enter the God Eternals at hand for Siggy, and Cry of the Canarium double in his opening hand here, as well as a Vraska's Contempt and an Absorb, all different ways to deal with what Mono-Red's trying to do. Right,
he's got lots of 3-mana spells, really needs to find Black Source number 3 here to be able to kind of have a chance against kind of the average Mono-Red aggressive start. He needs to have that Cry of the Carnarium on time, but if he does, you know, he does have a couple of removal effects, Vraska's Contempt to gain him some life, and then he also has Absorb, which is extremely powerful against the Mono-Red aggressive decks, because anytime your opponent fires off a Lightning Strike and you absorb it, you've basically countered 2 Lightning Strikes.
And it's interesting here to note that his lands are going to be a little bit more painful than we saw in something like Gregor Kowalski's Dremir control list, which was one of the reasons he decided to play that over something like Esper.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so here we go. We are off to the races. Fanatical Firebrand, the classic turn 1 here for Paulo, Vitor, Damo, Rosa.
And being on the play here, absolutely huge for the Mono-Red deck. This allows for Paulo to get an additional points of damage with his cheap creatures before Mike Sigrist has the ability to cast that Cry of the Carnarium in hand.
Another Fanatical Firebrand will take Mike down to 17. Get to Lava Runner, the follow-up. And no lands yet for Sigrist.
So that was actually a little bit interesting there. I thought he could have, Paulo could have even considered casting Skewer the Critic Stare.
Right.
And then next turn play Lava Runner and then play Shock, and he would have gotten an additional point of damage with that G2 Lava Runner.
So edges to be gained in Mono-Red. Not necessarily as straightforward as a lot of people imagine it to be, but Siggy's already down to 11. There's land number 3. Thank goodness it's time for Cry of the Carnarium. Woohoo, goodbye to the board of Paulo.
That was huge, and it wasn't a shock land either. The Drowned Catacomb was the perfect land so that he doesn't take damage here.
Speaking of a shock land, how about a shock to the dome, down to 9. Vishudo Pyromancer will make that 7. So we still have some work to do here on Siggy's side of the battlefield.
However, Paulo is out of cards here, so...
All right, here we go. Another land pain-free. And Cry of the Carnarium there to deal with the creature. And why that over something like Contempt?
Well, Cry of the Carnarium's effectiveness is going to go down over time, and Contempt also allows you to deal with, you know, cards potentially like Chandra.
Sure.
Which I don't know if Siggy remembers or knows that if Paulo has it, but you know that is a common card that the Mono-Red decks play.
Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, hits the table for Mike Sigrist, Fanatical Firebrand here for Paulo, but that card is exactly what he wants and what he needs.
Yeah, that Drowned Catacomb was huge. Huge. If he doesn't draw that, this game is basically over. But now it's gone to the other side of the spectrum. At this point, it's going to be extremely difficult for Mike Sigrist to lose here because he does have all the lands, he's got the Absorb, and he even has that Vraska's Contempt. So what I could even see him doing here is just firing off something like a main phase Vraska's Contempt so that he can fully use all of the mana provided by Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. So he can go Vraska's Contempt, play a land, untap my mana, so I have access to both Absorb and Chemist's Insight at end of turn.
And that's called mana efficiency.
Oh yeah.
Something to keep in mind if you're looking to up your game. Teferi here untapping a couple of lands, so now he can do whatever he wants basically, and it's just a land for Paulo, which is pretty punishing. A couple of lands off that Chemist's Insight, Vraska's Contempt, the draw for Sigrist, plus Teferi here. Find some more toys. Ooh, it's Akaya's Wrath. It's like Christmas.
Yeah, so we're now at the point where I believe that Siggy basically is 99% to win this game. And it's just, you know, of course the Esper control deck just takes a little bit of time to actually close out the game. So that's what we're going to see here. Sigrist at this point is, you know, a virtual lock to win because he has both Vraska's Contempt, Absorb, Teferi, Hero of Dominaria is almost about to Emblem, and he has just Chemist's Insight and Graveyard as well.
And you can see here the power of Narset as well, being able to find you basically whatever you want, 4 cards in. Another land here for Paulo.
Paulo not giving up just yet. Probably going to wait till maybe Teferi goes to the Emblem.
Sigrist here just going to take the turn back, Godless Shrine, the draw. Narset's going to take another peek and just whatever you want here at this buffet. It looks like it's going to be a Vraska's Contempt. Teferi continuing to tick up towards his ultimate, which basically spells death for the other player once that happens.
One thing Mike Sigrist can now do is also play Teferi Time Raveler and bounce the Narset to get additional activations of... Oh, no, never mind, sorry.
No,
Teferi cannot bounce
He can't bounce Planeswalkers. It would be sweet, though.
Yeah. But yeah. Big T and little T now.
I like little t, people writing it as Teferi, but with the E as the letter 3.
Wow. All right.
And that is it. Paulo, Vitor, Damo, Rosa hits concede. And that is game number 1 going to Mike Sigrist fairly easily there.
Yeah, I mean, it was so crucial for him to draw the Black Source in time for the Cryotic Carnarium, which got him there. And, you know, Paulo did have a reasonable start there, but, you know, wasn't able to slam down something like an Experimental Frenzy or something to kind of pull further ahead on cards.
We can see here Siggy bringing in all those Enter the God Eternals 2 out of the sideboard. Critical card, obviously, in this matchup because of the life gain and just the huge swing it provides you.
Yeah, and as you can see, you know, boarding out cards like Chemister's Insight because he almost never has time to cast something like that. Narset doesn't do particularly a lot either. You want all your cards to be kind of proactive. Like, I want it to be a removal spell or a counter spell for this matchup.
Duress as well in the deck here as we head into game number 2. And talk about the importance of having that card available when you're playing against something like Mono-Red.
Yeah, it's even more important because sometimes hand disruption isn't great against other versions of Mono-Red in the past because sometimes they just have no cards in hand and the Duress doesn't do anything. But it's so important in this matchup to make sure that you have the Duress for cards like Chandra and Experimental Frenzy that Mike chose to bring it in. And keep in mind, again, cards like Narset and Chemister's Insight, not very good here. So anything that's somewhat relevant, somewhat useful that you can cast in the early phases of the game, that's what Mike Sigrist is looking for.
All right, let's take a look at Sigrist's opening hand here. A couple of lands, Search for Azcanta, Duress, Absorb. What do you think?
I think he's likely going to ship this back. It's a little bit slow. He doesn't have blue mana for Absorb, so this just doesn't have enough going on. So I think he's going to send it back. If one of those black-white lands was a Hallowed Fountain, I could consider keeping.
For sure.
Ugh. The all check land hand here with all Glacial Fortress, Chapel, and Drowned Catacomb. But again, the downside of playing all of those lands is just that if you do not have the Shock land, if you don't have the Hallowed Fountain or Watery Grave, all of them come into play tapped, which is not what you want against Mono-Red.
Taking a look here, too, at Paulo's hand, we've got a couple of good threats and a payoff in Chandra Fire Artisan, Viashino Pyromancer here on 2. Knocks Siggy down to 18, and, well, there's a Hallowed Fountain.
Yeah, so that was big. So now he can play that, take the 2 damage, and then use Moment of Craving on the Viashino Pyromancer.
All right, so we see him take the hit there down to 16.
Yeah, and Mike Sigrist just wondering if it's better to just fire it off now or just wait till Paulo attacks, but he thinks it's so likely that he's going to do it anyways. He's just doing it now. And remember, it's important to, you know, not get so greedy and kill those creatures right away because of cards like Light Up the Stage. You don't want to give your opponent a discount on the spectacle cost of those cards.
Goblin Chain Whirler for Paulo here. Hallmark card of the Mono-Red deck. Gets in for another 3. Sigrist down to 14.
I think Paulo's going to probably play out a Tybalt here. I think Chandra is one of the most important threats here. So Mike Sigrist is representing Absorb here. So you want to kind of try to play around that by getting Mike to counter everything that's not Chandra.
And it's always a question, like, do you just jam and force them to deal with it in case you don't have it, or do you play it a little safe?
Oh, okay, never mind. Paulo just putting Mike Sigrist to the test here. Do you have the Absorb?
Yep. And he did, so Chandra into the yard, gaining some life, back up to 17. Kaya's Wrath here, taking down just 1 creature.
So this does sequence nicely if Paulo does draw land number 5, because if he did, he can actually play both the Pyromancer and Tybalt in his hand.
So Tybalt hits the field with his friend, that 1/1 Devil. Land was the draw here. Vraska's Contempt, though, for Sigrist.
Yeah, probably just going to fire it off on the Tybalt here.
Bye, Tybalt. And he's able to gain that life after Tybalt leaves, so he's back up to 19, which is a great place to be, plus Teferi in hand. I mean, it's not the best place in the whole world, but it's not too bad.
Yeah, it's rough because Paulo does have a bunch of damage sources in hand. He does have the Pyromancer and the Gitu Lava Runner. So, but the Teferi is still not horrible. It's going to absorb some damage and also draw Mike a card. But Paulo is now in a decent position here to just, at any point, draw one of those 4-mana cards that we talked about before, cards like Experimental Frenzy and Chandra.
Here comes Teferi. Big T, gonna plus to draw a card for Sigrist.
And I think Paulo's probably going to use Lightning Strike here to deal 3 points of damage to Teferi, and then try to finish it off with either an attack from the Pyromancer or the Gitu Lava Runner. I could also potentially see Paulo, look at Paulo, or imagine Paulo playing it safe here and attacking with 2/2 power creatures just to ensure that Teferi dies, just in case Mike Sigrist has a removal spell in hand, like Mortify or Moment of Craving.
All right, so we do see the strike to put Teferi down to 2 from Paulo. Big attack here.
And look at this, everything.
Yeah, everything, because
Teferi.
respect the 2 cards in hand from Sigrist. And, ooh, just tough draws here for Siggy. Another land off the top.
Now Paulo going to be attacking, holding back that Gitu Lava Runner, playing around maybe a potential sweeper, identifying that, 4 points of damage is probably good enough here to turn and force Mike
or just
to cast
absorb
Cry
or
the Canary.
whatever.
Yeah.
Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, number 2 for Sigrist. Let's see what we can find here. Can the top of his deck be a little more kind to him?
He wants a Cry of the Carnarium. But Vraska's Contempt is also totally fine here. He's going to be able to untap his lands and use Vraska's Contempt on that Viashino Pyromancer.
Ooh, and there's Chandra.
Oh, and this is tricky because, oh no, okay, Paulo's firing it off. So now this gives Siggy a lot more information, right?
Yes.
Because now Siggy can fire off the Contempt on the Chandra. I was wondering if Paulo was going to attack first.
Right.
Because if he attacks first, right? If he attacks first, Siggy is almost assuredly going to use Vraska's Contempt on the creature.
Sequencing.
Right.
There's a look at Chandra on the left side of your screen as well, a new addition from War of the Spark. And here come the creatures in at Teferi. Siggy says, sure.
That doesn't kill it just yet.
And here's Vraska's Contempt to take down Chandra, Fire Artisan. So Sigrist hanging into this game by his fingers on the edge of the cliff.
Yeah, but he still needs to find answers to these creatures. He does have this Teferi, but if he finds a couple of lands, this is tough because now Teferi's gonna die.
Yep.
Paulo likely is gonna do the same thing that he did earlier, just send everything at Teferi. But Paulo doesn't have a backup threat either, so Siggy does have some time here. Keep in mind, he's still sitting at 14. Right.
All right, down goes Teferi after the attack there from Paulo. Land, still not playing out that Gitu Lava Runner. Duress off the top, womp womp.
Yeah, and he knows it's not going to do a whole lot, so he's saving it. And one thing that you'll notice is Paulo is continuing to play all the lands in hand. Typically, players will sandbag lands to kind of represent spells in their hand, but in this, for the mono-red deck, because you're playing the card Experimental Frenzy, you want to play every single land possible so that you can just potentially just go off with it.
Yep.
Yes.
Another land for Sigrist. Back over to Paulo, finds a Fanatical Firebrand. Not even going to play it. Down to 5.
All right. Siggy really needs an answer.
Oh, ooh. Kaya's Wrath off the top.
I'm not really sure what he's thinking about here.
I mean, does he maybe want, he's like, should I cast this Duress? I don't know.
Maybe I should wait till next turn.
Yeah, get one more creature. The greed. So this Devil's going to go down doing 1 damage in the process.
Yeah, I think it's more, what should I do with this Duress? And this is the downside you see with Duress. When the games go later and you top deck a Hand Disruption spell, it just doesn't do anything.
Fanatical Firebrand. Here for Paulo and a Direfleet Daredevil as well.
Yeah, I wonder if there's actually a relevant card. Is there like a Thought Erasure? I don't exactly remember. I mean, he's certainly going to cast it here.
Let's find out. Taking a peek at Sigrist's graveyard, finding out what...
I don't think he has a single card that he wants. He's not going to cast Moment of Craving, right? He's not going to play Kaya's Wrath. So he's probably just playing it because now Siggy is at 3. This is lethal next turn.
And a Mortify off the top.
And Mike's going to play this no matter what, so just maybe saving some time. I don't know. But now at this point, Paulo, any burn spell off the top will be lethal. And, Siggy needs to do a lot of work here. Part of the downside of boarding out all the Narsets and your Chemisters inside is you've boarded out all your sources of card advantage. So many of them, right?
True.
Now you only have Teferi, Hero of Dominaria as a card that can get you cards over time. I mean, to be fair, a card like Enter the God Eternals does effectively count as more than 1 card, right?
Yeah.
Because you're killing a creature, you're gaining a life, and you have a 4/4 body. That's basically 3 cards against mono-red.
But it is the price to pay, and that's a good thing to point out, that it's not free to make those sideboarding decisions.
Oh, staying alive!
What is this? The Bee Gees is the year 1973. Mike Sigrist staying alive.
All right, but he's at 1, and how many spells are in the yard?
I don't actually know.
This might just be a 1-2.
Oh,
okay,
Sig
not
beats it
quite.
is a 1-2.
Oh, no.
Oh, well, that's enough to do it. Mike Sigrist hits concede, and that is game number 2 going to Paulo, Vitor, Damo, Rosa. All right, let's head back to the sideboards. Oh, brutal. That late in the game, still a 1-2, no haste.
Yeah, exactly. And now, Mike boarding out the Depraz, he's like, you know what? I think I might need a little more action here. And so, also, Teferi Time Raveler is a little bit better on the play.
Okay.
You know, you do have more opportunities to protect it with some removal, get some of the cheap creatures off the battlefield turn 2, and then follow that up with a Teferi and then using a minus.
And we talked about those duresses coming in before, and now they are out. Sigrist kind of debating about those chemisters' insights, it looked like, as well.
And also remembering to apply the styles.
Oh, you've got to apply the styles.
You can't forget, right?
I'm just a sucker for those, by the way, Paul. I spent, okay, admission time.
Lots of gems.
I spent gems to make, a Lyra. I did it, everybody. I did it. Okay.
Oh, you know what? That's fair. I'm more the, I need all the cards possible, so I just save everything just to make sure I get all the cards. But yeah, I mean, I think Mike thinking about, you know, hey, do I need to find other ways to get ahead on cards? But, you know, he does have the 4 copies of Teferi. We talked about how Enter the God Eternals also gives you effective card advantage.
Yep.
And then also Search for Azcanta. You know, if you ever get to the late game with Search, that'll also take over the game because the red deck has no answers for that enchantment.
All right, here we go. Game number 3. We are all tied up, as we've been all through this morning with these matchups going to game 3.
Oof, that's a nice opening
Look at those
hand.
2 Moment of Cravings. Yeah. Hello.
Absolutely.
So what are you going to... Wait, well, we'll find out what happens, but I'm really interested in to see how he sequences things with that Search for Azcanta and that Thought Erasure.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one thing about Search for Azcanta is not, you know, it's not something that you necessarily need to fire off on turn 2.
Okay.
The most important thing with Search is just you want to flip it. At the same time, you know, if Mike doesn't draw land number 3, he might want to fire that off. But if Paulo leads out with, you know, a Lava Runner or any other creature, he's probably just going to go with Moment of Craving. And given that he drew that swamp, he doesn't need to play that Search for Azcanta.
Isolated Chapel, the play here, entering the battlefield with a Herald of Bells.
Yeah, and Swamp kind of awkward here with that Absorb in hand. Needs to find a blue source, but the thing is, Absorb, you don't even necessarily need it turn 3. It's such a powerful card in this matchup. If at any point you can fire that off, you're going to get a lot of value.
So it looks like Mike Sigrist is going to fire off this Moment of Craving to take down the Get 2 Lava Runner.
But Paulo's going to have a nice turn here. He's going to have Fanatical Firebrand attack, and then he's going to be able to Spectacle light up the stage.
All right, so in comes the Firebrand, down comes the land, and here comes light up the stage for Paulo. Dovin's Veto, the draw here for Sigrist.
Yeah, and finding a crucial land there. Look at Paulo's hand. He's got the Chandra and the Frenzy. He just really needs to kind of put together some lands here.
So decision time for Mike Sigrist on what he wants to do this turn. What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, Thought Erasure is the type of card that you want to wait before turn 4. So if you have any other way to interact with your opponent, that's something that you might be interested in doing. But at the same time, Siggy does want to find blue sources. Also curious to see what Paulo's working with here. And yeah, he's in a tough spot. He doesn't have a Vraska's Contempt, and he's like looking at those 4-mana cards, and he's thinking, man, I mean, I need to get one of them, right? But I need to still find another answer to the other one. And he does have it in the Dovin's Veto, but he also has to play around the threats that Paulo deploys as well.
All right, so it is going to be Experimental Frenzy that he chooses, surveilling Teferi into the yard as well. By the way, still at 21 life. Not for long, but this far into the game, that's got to make you feel pretty good against Mono-Red.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about how Mike Sigrist's opener looked quite strong. Paulo's hand is fantastic.
Oh, it's great.
He's got the cheap threats, multiple light up the stage. Paulo is just ahead on cards here. He's cast 2 light up the stages. He's getting the valuable mana sources. And look at this, he's got Mountain Direfleet Daredevil next turn as well.
Mike Sigrist down to 18 after that attack, and a Viashino Pyromancer from Paulo. And here we go. We'll see if we're going to see one of those big haymakers from him this turn. First things first, time to attack.
I think he's going to probably just play this Direfleet Daredevil. He's going to get the Direfleet Daredevil and play and cast Thought Erasure.
Yeah. Here we go. Direfleet Daredevil hits the table. Steal your Thought Erasure. Cast it against you.
Yeah, and then now Mike is probably going to use the Moment of Craving in hand. Get one of those 2/1s off the battlefield.
Here's Thought Erasure, by the way, cast by Paulo. Never feels good to get beat up with your own cards.
Yeah.
Right? Are you listening to me, Thief of Sanity? I'm talking to you.
And yeah, Daredevil does a similar thing here. And the reason why Mike Sigrist didn't fire off the Cast Down or Moment of Craving here is because this was the crucial turn. This is where Paulo has access to land number 4. And when he does, he can play Chandra or Frenzy. Siggy does not have an answer to either of those cards. So he desperately needs to keep up Dovin's Veto and then use the removal spell end of turn if Paulo chooses to play around the counter spells by not casting the 4 mana cards.
All right, we're having a surveil now from Paulo, taking a look at his own library, deciding whether to keep it or bin it.
Yeah, and it looks, is this resolving? Yeah, it is resolving. Okay. And Paulo taking one of Siggy's answers to the Planeswalker or Experimental Frenzy in Mike Sigrist's hand. He's like, I don't care about these creatures.
Yeah.
What I really care about is sticking one of my 4 mana cards and winning the game with that.
So after all is said and done, Dovin's Veto ripped out of hand from Mike Sigrist. Moment of Craving taking down the Pyromancer there.
That was a big draw for Siggy. He drew Blue Source, not painful.
Yes.
Blue Source number 2, so he does have access to Absorb, but of course Paulo does know about the Absorb, so he's probably just not going to run out his 4 mana cards, and he's like, look.
He's like, fine.
Right. I'm in a situation where I'm attacking every turn, and the pressure's on you. You need to do something about what I'm trying to do.
All right, so here we go. First strike from that Dire Fleet Daredevil in combat. Another 2 from those Fanatical Firebrands. And it looks like Paulo might force the issue here.
Yeah, because Paulo knows the exact contents of Mike Sigrist's hand, he might just be like, look, I know you have Absorb, but I don't want to play around it. You cast the Absorb, and the next turn I can play Frenzy, and I'm going to know that there's a very high likelihood that that resolves. So Paulo knows about the Absorb, and he's like, look, okay, I'm going to let you do this because I'm just going to hope that you don't draw the next answer.
All right, so Absorb there, taking care of Chandra, Fire Artisan, and just a land for Sigrist off the top is going to mean the search for Azcanta.
Oh, but this is great. Now there's a search for Azcanta in play. Sigrist has Cast Down. That's going to be spell number 6, card number 6 in his graveyard. So if he just puts into the graveyard whatever card is on top off the search for Azcanta reveal, he will be able to flip it.
All right, here we go. Back over to Paulo. Once again, last verse, same as the first attack, but Cast Down's going to take down Dire Fleet Daredevil, leaving the 2 Firebrands to get in.
So I imagine Paulo is now going to Spectacle out to light up the stage to see if he hits any number of lands that he can save and play in following turns.
Ooh, Rekindling Phoenix. And
actually, he might just play
bad.
that instead of the Frenzy. That just puts more pressure right now. Mike Sigrist has no cards in hand. I think he just wants to play out the Phoenix and force Siggy to draw something like a Vraska's Contempt.
Oh, well, there it is.
Like that one. Like that one on top.
All right. Vraska's Contempt taking care of that Rekindling Phoenix. The two were made for each other, really.
Right.
Back up to 16.
But Paulo's still looking in a completely fine position here. He gets to now attack with both of the Firebrands, and then he can play out the Mountain, play out the Pyromancer, and then also have an Experimental Frenzy, which he'll be able to untap with next turn.
Things looking good for Paulo here. Experimental Frenzy, revealing a runaway Steamkin on the top of his library.
Oh, right. And this makes sense. Running out the Frenzy first because, of course, he can still play that Pyromancer because it is not in Paulo's hand. It's in the exile zone from Light Up the Stage.
Here comes the Pyromancer. Will knock Sigrist down to 12. And search for Azcanta has never been more important. Moment of Craving.
Yeah, I think he's going to keep that because because he cast Vraska's Contempt last turn, he will be able to flip search. He can now use Moment of Craving to get the Viashino Pyromancer off the board and still activate search for Azcanta.
Sigrist here taking a moment to think about this decision, though. But he is able to buy himself some time here with this Moment of Craving, which is critical at this stage in the game.
Yeah, I think he wants to keep this Moment of Craving. He's going to prevent 2 damage, gain 2 life, and then still search with the Search for Azcanta, which then helps him dig for cards like Mortify to deal with the Frenzy, and maybe potentially even like a Teferi.
Sigrist tanking a little bit here on this decision. Elects to leave it on top, transform the Azcanta, Moment of Craving into hand, taking down the Pyromancer, gaining 2 life back up to 14 if he wants to fire it off right now.
And I guess maybe also deciding whether or not he wants to activate Azcanta the Sunken Ruin first before casting the Moment of Craving.
Oh, sure. But he does elect to go with the Moment of Craving there, gaining some life, passing back over to Paulo. Steamkin into hand, Direfleet Daredevil on top of the library.
Yeah, which is not going to do a whole lot here because Siggy has no creatures in play and no cards in hand. So probably just running out Direfleet Daredevil just as a threat, which is still completely fine here.
Yep. Taking a peek at his own graveyard, what could this potentially get if it were to get anything? Takes the Moment of Craving, because why not?
Now we get to see Experimental Frenzy again
All
do its
right,
thing.
Lightning Strike to the dome, land on top, play land for turn. And what is it? It's another land. All right, stop sign.
Now Siggy is sitting at 9, and he not only does he have to deal with the creatures in play, but he also just, I mean, priority number 1 also is also just getting rid of that Experimental Frenzy, so.
All right, Ascanta activation finds a Mortify.
Wow, and that was huge!
All right, Cry of the Carnarium.
He found answers to both of the threats.
Hey, not bad.
Oh my goodness. So now he's going to be able to Mortify Frenzy and cast Cry of the Carnarium for the board, and then he's going to have a clear board, and then be able to activate Ascanta, you know,
but is that good enough, Paul?
over.
Is that good enough to sit back and just wait for Ascanta to find you something?
I mean, Siggy is at 9. There is a Lightning Strike in Paulo's hand with that Runaway Steamkin. Paulo knows there's a land on top, so he's not going to just fire off the Lightning Strike right away. But, I mean, Siggy, that's exactly what he needed. This might be exactly what he needed to turn this around. But he still needs to find answers.
He does.
But, you know, Enter the God Eternals. He has a lot of great draws now.
All right, well, that land is not really one of them, but let's see if Ascanta can do him one better here. Take a peek at the top 4.
Looking for a 2-mana removal spell here for that Runaway Steamkin.
Well, there you go.
Ooh, this is interesting. I think he might want to just do it. He's going to take the 2 here because he thinks it's very likely to take 2 from the Steamkin anyways.
Yeah.
So he's playing that Cry of the Carnarium.
Yeah, I like it. Cry of the Carnarium, dealing with that Runaway Steamkin. Get those things off the table. They're a scourge. How about a Goblin Chain Whirler here for Paulo?
So now this is presenting lethal damage. An attack with Chain Whirler plus Lightning Strike is 6. Siggy's now at 6. And it all comes down to what Siggy draws here, along with that Ascanta the Sunken Ruin activation.
So Paulo going to fire off that Lightning Strike while Siggy's tapped out.
He needs an answer.
Cry of the Carnarium here.
And really heads up play. Paulo choosing to fire off Lightning Strike right away to play around a potential top decked Absorb.
That's right.
Mike Sigrist.
Enter the God Eternals.
That's not enough.
No, it's not.
That's not enough. He needed one more turn. Wow, okay. He almost turned it around.
So close.
So close.
Good game there from Mike Sigrist. Means the match does go to Paulo, Vitor, Damo, Rosa, and the sad little Cry of the Carnarium sitting in Siggy's hand. Wow.
Congratulations to Paulo, Vitor, Damo, Rosa. Once again, we see the power of the Mono-Red.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the Mono-Red deck is just... It mostly looks exactly the same as the versions that we've seen in the past. And yeah, if it isn't broken, you don't need to fix it, right? It's just one of those things where, you know, it just constantly puts pressure. And one of the issues with the Esper control deck at times is it just gets awkward draws. And we also saw that, like, there's a lot of these conditional cards that Mike Sigrist, you know, Thought Erasure is good early. Bad draw late. We saw Duress do nothing game 2. And then even there, Cry of the Carnarium lines up okay with some of the creatures, but wasn't enough to kill that Goblin Chain Whirler. And, you know, all those percentage points add up over time, and that's how the Mono-Red deck is able to just steal games left and right against these matchups.
Do you think it's going to continue to be kind of dominant as people play more and more Planeswalkers in their decks? Like, hey, I'm going to punish you for messing around?
Yeah, I think so. I think this is... The Mono-Red deck has just always been the deck that, like, look, if you're trying to do something a little unconventional, slow it down to kind of go over the top of the mid-range strategies, you know, you bring the Mono-Red deck. And I think the nice thing about the Mono-Red deck, though, is if you're in a meta where Mono-Red is the best deck, there are generally ways to beat Mono-Red, right? We print lots of just really powerful life gain effects, really strong cards. Brad Nelson, for example, brought Selesnya Tokens, which does have a favorable matchup against Mono-Red. Not overwhelmingly favorite, but it is quite good. So you know, I think if more people think that Mono-Red is going to be a huge part of the meta, people can adapt, and can find the solutions for Mono-Red.
All right, well, that is all we're going to focus on here for our Sapphire division, but we do have our correspondent Megan who's going to walk us through what else happened in this division.
Hey friends, Megan here with the Sapphire division, where the theme of the week was No Mercy. Our division had a set of lopsided matches in which one player executed their game plan flawlessly, with little care or consideration for the fact that their opponents had families, y'all. Ray Sato and Jean-Emmanuel Depraz faced off this week. Sato played Golgari mid-range, which, much like Golgari creatures, rose from the grave where the metagame had buried it to prove that it was alive, or at least undead. Depraz was on Temur Reclamation, and in Game 1, Sato honed in on the deck's demanding mana base as a weak spot, using Field of Ruin and Assassin's Trophy to destroy Depraz's non-basics. And because Depraz only had 2 basic lands in his deck, eventually Sato throttled his mana completely, destroying multiple of Depraz's lands in a single turn. While Game 2's land destruction wasn't nearly as aggressive, Sato still had too many ways to interact with the critical pieces of Depraz's deck, namely Wilderness Reclamation and Search for Azcanta. Depraz's deck could make a lot of mana, but strangely enough, Sato's creatures didn't really seem to care as they attacked him to death. Merfolk, you can't get them to appreciate anything. Also this week, Autumn Burchett played Mike Sigrist. In week 1, Burchett terrorized the division with Mono-Red Aggro. This week, Sigrist returned the favor, deploying a very pedestrian mix of wizards, goblins, and burn spells to defeat Burchett, who was just trying to go to the library. But Burchett and Tamiyo never got to the library. While Burchett was able to tread water for a little while against Sigrist attacks, the Mono-Red onslaught eventually got the better of them. Piotr Glogowski, playing Simic Nexus, did make great use of his library card in his match against Paulo, Vitor, Damo, Rosa. Together, Glogowski and Tamiyo researched whether it's mean to take extra turns or downright cruel. Meanwhile, Glogowski's Nissa, who shakes the world, wasn't bothering with research, instead using a natural talent for creating 3/3 elementals out of lands to quickly snuff out Damo Rosa, whose 4-color Dreadhorde deck never really got a chance to shine, looking instead like a generic Golgari mid-range type deck, minus all that cool/infuriating land destruction stuff Sato was doing. Marcio Carvalho and Andrea Mengucci at the bottom of the division this week also played. Like Damo Rosa, Mengucci played 4-color Dreadhorde, which I cannot stop typing as Dead Horse. It's creepy. While I've heard time and again that the deck is pretty cool, it once again didn't accomplish much in the face of Carvalho's team of Jeskai Super Friends. In Game 1, unlikely legend Fibblethip finally got his moment to shine by, well, just being on the battlefield. Carvalho also played Mox Amber, the Dominaria artifact with a lot of potential that hasn't yet seen a lot of play. Mengucci, meanwhile, wasn't hitting his land drops, and when Carvalho had several walkers and wizards in play while Mengucci still only had 3 lands, the game was effectively over. In Game 2, Mengucci's creatures just didn't stack up well against a team of powerful blue mages. I guess Gideon was there too. Are we still allowed to be mean to Gideon? It feels weird. Anyway, it was a bit of a lopsided game where Mengucci could never keep Carvalho's team from constantly accruing value, and eventually Sarkin made an entrance and transformed all his friends into dragons, which I've heard is just how people say hi on Tarkir. Surprisingly, Mengucci couldn't recover from 4 dragons attacking him in a single turn, and Carvalho took the match. And that's it for this week. Until next week, to the library!
Oh wow, what a matchup! Seeing Sarkin doing his work there, making 4/4s.
And we also just saw the Command the Dreadhorde decks get kind of beat up.
I know.
At least in this division. I mean, you know, this was kind of the new deck that a lot of people brought. But at least, you know, the matches that we saw so far, you know, some of the decks that really stood out last week still doing a lot of work, especially that Jeskai Walker's deck, just super impressive, and Sarkin just doing a number.
Oof. I love it.
All these mid-range strategies.
You know what? I can't even be mad when you've got a giant flying dragon army of planeswalkers coming at my face. It's just too cool.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you can just drop a Sarkin, like, you feel like you're just kind of building this fort.
It's a haste,
defense,
yes.
Right? You're just like, hey, I'm going to play all my planeswalkers. I'm just building creatures. Like, don't mess with me, man.
Just
I'm just
around
putting
here.
some stuff on the board, and all of a sudden, 20.
Bam.
Yeah. And that is kind of the power of Sarkin.
Well, we have our Sapphire standings ready if we want to take a peek there, and let me know what you think. Ooh.
So nobody undefeated in the Sapphire division here. We have, you know, Glogowski, Paulo, and Sato here, all at 3-1. We saw Paulo actually in the replay because he had a makeup match this week. Yeah, I mean, at this point, you know, with the records, with nobody sitting at 0-4 or anything, everybody is still kind of in the mix. Of course, at 1-3, it's going to be a lot more difficult. But you know, all the people sitting at 2-2 still have a chance here.
But also, if you don't have someone 4-0 in your division, that's fine because only one person is going to make it out of each division.
Exactly. So yeah, at this point, it's anybody's game. It's anybody's game. We have a bunch of 3-1s and 2-2s. So you know, the next few weeks will, you know, truly determine what happens here.
Very interesting with the Sapphire standings there. Well, I just want to mention that this weekend is a very special weekend. We mentioned briefly before, but to get into more of the details, the Mythic Championship qualifier weekend is today and tomorrow. So yesterday, I believe, was the cutoff that the top never mind, this cutoff was determined long ago. There were the April and what month is it? The March and April qualifiers. Yes. The top 1,000 in both limited and constructed have gone on, and at the end of the day, we're going to get to 128 players. Of that, the top 16 at the end of tomorrow are going to go to the Mythic Championship #3 that's happening in Vegas in June.
Yeah, and I've been seeing a lot of different people kind of run the numbers as to what record you're going to need today to make it to tomorrow.
We were talking about how we woke up and saw a lot of people tweeting, oh, well, I O2'd, I'm out.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. You are eliminated if you get 2 losses.
Because it started at 7 p.m. Pacific. So, you know, I woke up at like 8 o'clock and everybody was like, I'm O2 drop. I'm like, oh, no. But keep in mind, this is a huge tournament.
It's huge.
I think this is going to have 2,000 to 3,000 people playing in it. And this is the first time that we've had like a module set up where you can actually play a tournament. It's going to cut to 128 tomorrow. Then we will see who will be able to play with the MPL players.
That's going to be awesome.
In Mythic Championship 3. So very, very exciting stuff.
Absolutely. Now we're going to take another quick break, and after that, when we come back, we're going to go to the next division and see Lucas Esper 2 against Carlos Romeo.